Princess Zara of the Vethrian Empire stood at the massive window of her palace quarters, watching the twin suns set over the crystalline spires of her homeworld. Her luminescent blue skin shimmered in the fading light, and her silver hair moved like liquid mercury down her back. At 25 cycles old, she was considered one of the most beautiful beings in the known galaxy, with suitors from dozens of worlds seeking her hand in marriage. But Zara felt trapped. The Vethrian Empire controlled over 300 star systems, and, as the Emperor's only daughter, she was expected to marry for political alliance, not love. Her father had already arranged meetings with princes from the warlike Krex Federation and the wealthy merchant houses of Proxima. None of them interested her. They saw her as a prize, a way to gain power, not as a person with her own thoughts and dreams. "Your Highness," came a soft voice from behind her. Zara turned to see Commander Thane, the head of her personal guard detail. He was a tall, imposing Vethrian with the traditional warrior markings covering his arms. "The new security team has arrived from Earth. Your father has requested their immediate assignment to your protection detail." Zara sighed. "More guards? I already have 12 of your best warriors watching my every move. What could these humans possibly add?" "The Earth humans have proven quite resourceful in recent conflicts," Thane said carefully. "Their unconventional thinking has impressed the Imperial War Council. Your father believes their different perspective might be valuable." The princess had heard stories about humans. They were a relatively new species on the galactic stage, having only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. Most aliens considered them primitive and weak, lacking the advanced technology or physical prowess of the established galactic powers. But, recently, human soldiers had begun making names for themselves as unexpectedly effective fighters and tacticians. "Fine," Zara said with little enthusiasm. "Bring them in." A few minutes later, Thane returned with 5 humans in standard security uniforms. 4 of them stood at attention, their eyes scanning the room professionally. But one hung back slightly, his gaze fixed on the floor. He was shorter than the others, with brown hair and unremarkable features. While his companions projected confidence and military bearing, this one seemed almost apologetic for taking up space. "Your Highness," Thane announced, "this is Squad Leader Martinez, Sergeant Chen, Corporal Johnson, Private Williams, and..." He paused, checking his datapad, Private Marcus Cole. The shy one stepped forward when his name was called, offering a quick, awkward bow. "It's an honor to serve, Your Highness," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Zara found herself studying him curiously. In a galaxy where everyone seemed to want something from her, his obvious discomfort was almost refreshing. He wasn't trying to impress her or gain her favor. If anything, he looked like he wanted to disappear entirely. "Squad Leader Martinez," she addressed the confident woman at the front of the group. "What makes you think humans can protect me better than Vethrian warriors?" Martinez smiled. "Not better, Your Highness. Different. We think differently, fight differently, and, most importantly, we notice different things. Sometimes fresh eyes see what familiarity misses." Over the following days, Zara observed her new guards as they integrated with her existing security team. Martinez was clearly competent, Chen had an impressive technical background, Johnson was built like a fortress, and Williams had the eyes of someone who'd seen too much combat. But it was Marcus who kept drawing her attention. He never spoke unless spoken to directly, always positioned himself where he'd be noticed least, and seemed to have an uncanny ability to blend into the background. The other guards treated him with a mixture of affection and gentle teasing, calling him Ghost because of how quietly he moved. "Marcus," Zara said one afternoon as she walked through the palace gardens. She'd deliberately separated from the main group, knowing he'd be the one to follow at a discreet distance. "Tell me about Earth." He nearly jumped when she spoke to him directly. What would you like to know, Your Highness?" "What's it like?" "Your homeworld?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, as if unsure whether she really wanted an answer. "It's messy," he finally said. "Not like here. Everything on Vethria is perfect and planned and beautiful. Earth is chaotic. We have wars and poverty and natural disasters. But we also have. He struggled for words. We have hope, I guess. Even when things are bad, people keep trying to make them better. Zara found herself genuinely curious. What did you do before becoming a guard? I was a teacher, Marcus said, then, quickly added, just elementary school. Nothing important. You taught children? That's very important. He glanced at her, surprised. Most people don't think so. Especially here. I'm not exactly warrior material. He gestured at his unremarkable frame. Then, why did you volunteer for this assignment? Marcus was quiet again, and Zara thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, because someone told me I was good at protecting things that mattered. Something in his tone made Zara look at him more carefully. Who told you that? My sister, he said softly. Before she died. Zara felt something tighten in her chest. In her world of political maneuvering and fake smiles, such raw honesty was rare. I'm sorry for your loss. She was a doctor, Marcus continued, as if the words were spilling out against his will. She went to help with a plague outbreak on a colony world. Could have stayed safe on Earth, but she said some things were worth the risk. She saved a lot of people before. He trailed off. Before she caught the plague herself, Zara finished gently. Marcus nodded. She always said I had a gift for seeing what others missed, for protecting people without them even knowing they needed protection. I never believed her until you had to figure out how to honor her memory. He looked at her with surprise, as if amazed she understood. Yes. As days turned into weeks, Zara found herself seeking out these quiet conversations with Marcus. Unlike everyone else in her life, he never asked for anything, never tried to impress her, and never treated her like a prize to be won. He listened when she talked about feeling trapped, nodded when she expressed frustration with her father's plans, and shared small stories about Earth that painted a picture of a world where people had the freedom to choose their own paths. It's not perfect, he said one evening as they stood on a balcony overlooking the city. Humans make terrible mistakes. We fight wars over stupid things, we pollute our planet, we can be cruel to each other. But we also get to decide who we want to be. I've never had that choice, Zara admitted. From the day I was born, my entire life has been planned out for me. Who I'll marry, what planets I'll rule, even what I'm supposed to think about political issues. What would you choose? Marcus asked. If you could be anyone, do anything? It was such a simple question, but Zara found she didn't have a ready answer. She'd spent so little time thinking about what she actually wanted that the concept felt foreign. I don't know, she said honestly. I think I'd like to help people, somehow. Make a real difference instead of just being a symbol. Marcus smiled, and, for a moment his shyness disappeared entirely. That sounds like something your sister would have said. The comment should have been presumptuous, but, coming from Marcus, it felt like the highest compliment she'd ever received. Their growing friendship didn't go unnoticed. Commander Thane approached Marcus privately one day, his expression serious. Private Cole, I need to speak with you about maintaining appropriate boundaries with Princess Zara. Marcus immediately tensed. Sir, I've never been inappropriate. I'm not questioning your conduct, Thane interrupted. But, I am concerned about the princess's attachment to you. She specifically requests your presence during her private time, and she seems different when you're around. Different how? Happier, Thane admitted reluctantly. More like the person she was before the weight of the crown began to crush her spirit. But, Marcus, you need to understand the reality of the situation. She is going to marry Prince Krell of the Krex Federation next month. It's already been decided. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. She never mentioned. Because she's been hoping her father would change his mind. But, he won't. The alliance with the Krex is too important for the Empire's security. And, Prince Krell. Thane's expression darkened. Let's just say he has very specific ideas about how wives should behave. That night, Marcus found himself unable to sleep. He'd known, intellectually, that a princess could never have a real relationship with a nobody like him. But, hearing about her arranged marriage to someone who would likely treat her as property made him feel sick. He was walking the palace corridors, trying to clear his head, when he heard voices coming from the council chambers. The door was slightly ajar, and he could see Emperor Vorthak speaking with a group of advisors. The Krex Federation has agreed to provide military support for our expansion into the Outer Rim, the Emperor was saying. In exchange, they get trade rights and a marriage alliance with Zara. It's a fair deal. What about the princess's wishes? Asked one advisor. She's made it clear she doesn't want this marriage. Emperor Vorthak's laugh was cold. My daughter's wants are irrelevant. She exists to serve the Empire, just as I do. Prince Krell will break her of these romantic notions about choice and independence. Once she produces an heir, her purpose will be fulfilled. Marcus felt rage building in his chest. He'd spent weeks listening to Zara talk about her dreams, her hopes for making a difference in the galaxy. The idea of her being handed over to someone who would deliberately crush her spirit was unbearable. But what could he do? He was just a shy teacher from a backwater planet, and she was the most powerful princess in the galaxy. As he stood there, struggling with feelings of helplessness, Marcus remembered his sister's words, "You have a gift for protecting people without them even knowing they need protection." Maybe it was time to stop being shy and start being what Zara needed him to be. The next morning, Marcus requested a private meeting with squad leader Martinez. She listened carefully as he explained what he'd overheard, her expression growing darker with each detail. That's barbaric, she said finally. Even by galactic standards. We have to do something, Marcus said. I know it's not our place, but, actually, it is our place, Martinez interrupted. Our mission is to protect Princess Zara. That includes protecting her from threats to her emotional and mental well-being, not just physical danger. What are you suggesting? Martinez smiled grimly. I'm suggesting that humans have a reputation for being unpredictable and resourceful. Maybe it's time we lived up to that reputation. As Marcus listened to Martinez outline a plan that was either brilliant or completely insane, he realized that for the first time in his life, he was ready to stop being invisible. Zara had shown him that some things were worth fighting for, even when the odds seemed impossible. And if there was one thing humans were good at, it was proving that impossible just meant nobody had tried hard enough yet. The stage was set for a confrontation that would either save a princess's freedom or destroy them all. But, as Marcus thought about Zara's smile and her dreams of making a real difference in the galaxy, he knew that some risks were worth taking. After all, his sister had taught him that some things were worth protecting, no matter the cost. Marcus spent the next 3 days studying every detail of the palace's security systems, guard rotations, and protocol procedures. His military training had taught him to observe and analyze, but his teaching background gave him something equally valuable, the ability to think like someone trying to solve an impossible problem. The plan Martinez had outlined was audacious in its simplicity. They wouldn't try to fight the Empire or kidnap the princess. Instead, they would create a situation that forced Emperor Vorthak to reconsider the marriage alliance by demonstrating that Prince Krell was unfit to protect what belonged to him. The key, Martinez explained to the team during a private briefing in Marcus's quarters, is that we make it look like incompetence on the Krex Federation's part, not sabotage on ours. Chen, their tech specialist, had been monitoring communications between Vethria and the Krex homeworld. Prince Krell is arriving tomorrow with a full diplomatic entourage, she reported. 50 guards, 12 advisors, and enough political pressure to make this marriage happen whether the princess wants it or not. What's our timeline? Johnson asked. The formal engagement ceremony is in 5 days, Martinez said. Once that happens, breaking the betrothal becomes much more difficult politically. We need to act before then. Marcus found himself thinking about Zara, probably lying awake in her chambers, knowing that her freedom had an expiration date. The thought made his chest tight with an emotion he wasn't ready to name. What do you need from me? He asked. Martinez looked at him seriously. The hardest part. You need to keep the princess calm and unaware of what we're doing. If she knows about the plan, she might accidentally give us away. And Marcus. She paused. You need to be prepared for the possibility that even if we succeed, this won't end the way you want it to. Marcus nodded, understanding. Even if they prevented this marriage, Zara would still be a princess with responsibilities to her empire. And he would still be a guard from a species most of the galaxy considered barely civilized. But at least she'd have a choice. The next day, Prince Krell arrived with all the pomp and ceremony befitting a diplomatic visit. Marcus got his first look at the man who was supposed to become Zara's husband during the formal reception in the palace's grand hall. Krell was everything Marcus had expected and worse. Tall and powerfully built even by Krex standards, with the traditional battle scars marking his green-scaled skin, he carried himself with the arrogance of someone who had never been told no. His eyes, when they fixed on Princess Zara, held the cold calculation of someone appraising property. Princess Zara, Krell said in heavily accented Vethrian as he took her hand. You are even more beautiful than the holographic records suggested. I look forward to our union. Marcus watched from his position along the wall as Zara forced a smile. Thank you, Prince Krell. I hope your journey from the Krex homeworld was pleasant. Adequate, Krell replied dismissively. Though I must say, I'm surprised to see human guards in your detail. I was under the impression that Vethrians preferred more capable protection. The insult hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus felt the other guards tense, but Martinez's subtle hand signal kept them in place. Emperor Vorthak laughed, clearly trying to diffuse the tension. The humans have proven surprisingly effective. Sometimes unexpected approaches yield interesting results. Indeed, Krell said, his gaze sweeping over the human contingent with obvious disdain. Though I trust that once we are wed, Princess Zara will be protected by proper Krex warriors. Humans are adequate for peacetime, but real threats require real soldiers. Marcus saw Zara's jaw tighten at the casual dismissal of her guards. It was one thing to insult the humans, but implying that her father's security arrangements were inadequate bordered on diplomatic rudeness. I have complete confidence in my current protection detail, she said firmly. Krell's smile didn't reach his eyes. Of course, my dear. Though I think you'll find that Krex methods are far more thorough. That evening, as the diplomatic reception wound down, Marcus found himself assigned to escort duty as Zara retired to her chambers. She was unusually quiet, her normal grace replaced by a tense rigidity that spoke of barely controlled emotion. Are you all right, Your Highness? Marcus asked quietly as they walked through the palace corridors. He spoke about me like I wasn't even there, she said suddenly. Like I was a piece of artwork he was planning to hang in his collection. I noticed. Zara stopped walking and turned to face him. Marcus, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you think there's any way this marriage doesn't happen? Marcus felt his heart break a little at the hope in her voice. I think, he said carefully, that humans have a saying, it's not over until it's over. She smiled for the first time that day. That's very human of you. Is that bad? No, she said softly. It's exactly what I needed to hear. As they reached her chambers, Zara paused at the door. Marcus? Thank you. For everything. For listening, for treating me like a person instead of a title, for. She struggled for words. For showing me that there are still good people in the galaxy. Before Marcus could respond, she disappeared into her quarters, leaving him standing in the hallway with a mixture of determination and heartbreak warring in his chest. The next morning, Martinez's plan began in earnest. It started with small things. Chen accidentally caused a minor glitch in the communication array that delayed important messages from the Krex delegation to their homeworld. Johnson discovered security concerns with the diplomatic quarters that required the Krex guards to be repositioned, disrupting their familiar patrol patterns. Williams found potential contamination in the food supplies designated for the Krex delegation, forcing them to rely on unfamiliar Vethrian rations. None of these incidents were serious enough to be considered sabotage, but, together they created an atmosphere of mild incompetence and inconvenience that began to wear on Krell's temper. Marcus's job was more subtle and infinitely more difficult. He had to gather intelligence on the prince's habits, weaknesses, and plans while maintaining his normal duties protecting Zara. What he learned made him even more determined to prevent the marriage. Krell spoke freely in front of the inferior human guards, apparently convinced they were too stupid to understand the implications of what he was saying. During a private conversation with his own advisors, which Marcus overheard while stationed outside the diplomatic quarters, the prince revealed his true intentions. "The princess has too much spirit," Krell said in his native language, which Marcus had been studying intensively since arriving on Vethria. "But Kreck's training methods will cure her of such independence quickly enough." "What about the political implications?" one of his advisors asked. "Emperor Vorthak seems quite fond of his daughter." "The emperor needs our military alliance more than he needs his daughter's happiness," Krell replied coldly. "Once she's carrying my heir, her father will have no choice but to support whatever disciplinary measures I deem necessary." Marcus had to grip the wall to keep from storming into the room. The casual way Krell discussed breaking Zara's spirit, as if it were merely a training exercise, made him understand exactly why humans had developed such a fierce reputation in combat. When someone threatened something you cared about, rational thought became secondary to protective fury. But Marcus forced himself to think like a teacher solving a problem, not a soldier seeking vengeance. Krell's arrogance was his weakness. The prince was so convinced of his own superiority that he couldn't imagine being outmaneuvered by inferior beings. That night, Marcus shared what he'd learned with Martinez and the team. "We need to accelerate the timeline," Martinez decided after hearing the full scope of Krell's plans. "The formal engagement ceremony is in 3 days, but if we wait that long, we might not be able to stop this." "What do you have in mind?" Chen asked. Martinez smiled grimly. "We're going to arrange a little demonstration of just how effective human protection can be. And we're going to make sure Prince Krell gets to experience it firsthand." The plan she outlined was risky, requiring split-second timing and absolute trust between team members. More importantly, it required Marcus to do something that went against every instinct he'd developed over years of trying to remain invisible. "You'll have to get Princess Zara to trust you completely," Martinez explained. "When the time comes, she'll need to follow your lead without question, even if she doesn't understand what's happening." "She already trusts me," Marcus said quietly. "This is different. This is asking her to bet her life on your judgment." Marcus thought about Zara's smile, her dreams of making a difference, her quiet desperation at being trapped in a life she never chose. She deserves the chance to choose her own path. "And if she chooses something that doesn't include you?" The question hit Marcus like a physical blow, but he'd already considered that possibility during the long, sleepless nights since learning about the marriage arrangement. "Then, at least it will be her choice." Martinez nodded approvingly. "That's why she trusts you, Ghost. You're probably the only person in her life who wants her to be happy more than you want her to be yours." The next day brought unexpected complications. Emperor Vorthak announced that the formal engagement ceremony would be moved up by 2 days, citing astrological considerations that Marcus suspected had more to do with the growing tension between the Vethrian and Kreck's delegations. "We're out of time," Martinez announced during an emergency team meeting. "It happens tonight, or not at all." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "Tonight?" "But we haven't finished. Plans change, Ghost. That's what humans do better than anyone else in the galaxy. We adapt." That afternoon, Marcus found Zara in the palace gardens, staring at the fountain where they'd had their first real conversation. She looked smaller somehow, as if the weight of her impending fate was physically crushing her. "Tomorrow night, I become engaged to Prince Krell," she said without turning around. "In 6 months, I'll be married. In a year, I'll probably be pregnant with an heir to strengthen the alliance between our peoples." Marcus wanted to tell her about the plan, to give her hope, but he knew that any premature revelation could destroy everything they'd worked for. "What do you want, Zara?" he asked instead, using her name without the title for the first time. She turned to look at him, tears glittering in her luminescent eyes. "I want to matter. I want my life to mean something beyond just being a symbol or a breeding mare for political alliances. I want to wake up every morning knowing that I chose to be where I am." "Then, choose," Marcus said simply. It's not that easy. Maybe not. But maybe the choice isn't as impossible as you think. Something in his tone made her look at him more carefully. Marcus, what aren't you telling me? Before he could answer, Commander Thane appeared at the garden entrance. Your Highness, your father requests your presence in the throne room. Prince Krell wishes to discuss the ceremony arrangements. As Zara walked away, she glanced back at Marcus one more time. In her eyes, he saw a flicker of something that might have been hope. Now all he had to do was make sure he didn't let her down. That evening, as the palace settled into its nighttime routine, Marcus made his final preparations. In a few hours, he would either help save the woman he'd come to love, or destroy both their lives in the attempt. But, as he checked his equipment and reviewed the plan one more time, Marcus realized that for the first time since his sister's death, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be, doing exactly what he was meant to do. Some things were worth protecting, no matter the cost. And Princess Zara's freedom was definitely one of them. The plan began at midnight, when the palace was supposed to be at its most secure and peaceful. Marcus positioned himself outside Princess Zara's chambers, following his normal patrol route, while Martinez and the rest of the team took their designated positions throughout the palace. Chen had spent the previous day carefully mapping the security system's blind spots and creating what she called temporary vulnerabilities in the detection grid. Nothing that would compromise the princess's actual safety, but enough gaps to allow unauthorized movement if someone knew exactly where to look. At 12:15, the first phase initiated. Johnson, positioned near the diplomatic quarters, triggered a minor emergency alarm in the Krex delegation's wing. Nothing serious, a supposedly malfunctioning environmental control system that created an unpleasant but harmless chemical smell. Protocol required the immediate evacuation of that section while maintenance teams investigated. Prince Krell and his entourage were forced to relocate to temporary quarters in the palace's guest wing, disrupting their security arrangements and putting them on edge. More importantly, it separated them from their advanced communication equipment, making it harder for them to coordinate with their homeworld. Marcus watched through the security feeds as Krell berated the Vethrian maintenance staff, his arrogance on full display as he treated the incompetent palace workers with open contempt. Several Vethrian guards were present, and Marcus could see their expressions hardening at the prince's behavior. Perfect. At 12:30, Williams initiated Phase 2. Using his access to the palace's food service areas, he discovered evidence of contamination in the water supply to the guest wing. Again, nothing dangerous, just enough impurities to require an immediate shutdown and rerouting to backup systems. This forced the already displaced Krex delegation to accept temporary accommodation in the servants' quarters, a move that absolutely infuriated Prince Krell and pushed his diplomatic composure to its breaking point. This is unacceptable. Krell's voice echoed through the corridors as he confronted Emperor Vorthak in the main hall. Either your palace staff is incompetent beyond measure, or someone is deliberately sabotaging my visit. Emperor Vorthak, clearly stressed by the series of unfortunate accidents, tried to maintain diplomatic calm. Prince Krell, I assure you these incidents are purely coincidental. Our maintenance teams are working around the clock to resolve coincidental? Krell snarled. First the communication disruption, then the evacuation, now this? I'm beginning to think that Vethrian hospitality is not what it once was. Marcus saw Zara watching from a balcony overlooking the main hall, her expression troubled as she witnessed her father being humiliated by her intended husband. This was exactly the kind of behavior that would make the Emperor question whether Krell was truly suitable for his daughter, but they needed something more dramatic to seal the deal. At 1 o'clock, Phase 3 began. Martinez had carefully studied the patrol patterns of both the Vethrian guards and Krell's personal security detail. She'd identified a 15-minute window when the convergence of rotations would leave a specific section of the palace temporarily undermanned. It was a gap that proper coordination should have caught, but the confusion caused by the previous emergencies had disrupted normal communication patterns. The Krex guards, forced to adapt to unfamiliar territory and unexpected changes, were making exactly the kind of mistakes that professional security forces were trained to avoid. Marcus received Martinez's signal and moved into position. This was the most dangerous part of the plan, requiring him to temporarily leave his post protecting Zara. But Chen was monitoring all security feeds, and Williams had positioned himself where he could intercept any actual threats to the princess. Moving through Chen's carefully mapped blind spots, Marcus made his way to the palace's central security hub. His target wasn't the main systems that would be too obvious and could actually compromise the princess's safety. Instead, he focused on the secondary monitoring station that tracked the guest quarters. Using techniques he'd learned during his military training, Marcus created what would appear to be a sophisticated external intrusion into the palace's security network. The kind of attack that could only come from someone with detailed knowledge of Vethrian systems and advanced technological capabilities. The kind of attack that would suggest either an inside job or a threat from one of the Empire's enemies. The alarms began wailing at 1:17. Security breach in the guest quarters, came the announcement over the palace's communication system. All units respond immediately. Marcus slipped back through the blind spots, returning to his position outside Zara's chambers just as she emerged, awakened by the commotion. "Marcus, what's happening?" she asked, her sleep clothes hastily covered by a robe. "Security alert, Your Highness. Please remain in your chambers while we assess the situation." But, even as he said it, Marcus knew that Zara's natural curiosity and concern for her father would make staying put impossible. Sure enough, she insisted on going to the main security center to get first-hand information about what was happening. This was what Marcus had been counting on. As they made their way through the palace corridors, they encountered Prince Krell and his guards rushing toward the guest quarters. The prince's face was flushed with rage, and he was shouting orders in his native language that Marcus now understood perfectly. "Find whoever did this. I want them executed as an example. This is clearly an assassination attempt on my person." "Prince Krell," Zara called out, her diplomatic training overriding her personal feelings. "Are you injured? Do you need medical assistance?" Krell whirled around, his eyes blazing with fury. "Injured? No, princess, but only because my guards are competent, unlike your father's pathetic security force." Marcus felt Zara stiffen beside him at the insult to her father and their palace guards. This was going exactly as Martinez had planned. "I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation," Zara began, but Krell cut her off. "Reasonable? Your palace has been systematically compromised all evening. First incompetent maintenance, now a direct security breach. Either your people are fools, or someone is trying to kill me." "Perhaps," came a cold voice from behind them, "the problem isn't with Vethrian security, but with the protection methods your own guards are using." Everyone turned to see Martinez approaching, her expression professionally neutral but her tone carrying just enough challenge to get Krell's attention. "Excuse me?" Krell snarled. "I'm squad leader Martinez, part of Princess Zara's security detail. I've been monitoring tonight's events, and I have some concerns about your security protocols." Marcus had to admire Martinez's performance. She was playing Krell's arrogance perfectly, knowing that he couldn't resist responding to a challenge from someone he considered beneath him. "You dare question Kreck's security methods?" Krell stepped closer to Martinez, his imposing bulk meant to intimidate. "Human, you have no idea what real protection looks like." "Actually, I do," Martinez replied calmly. "And I know that competent security adapts to changing circumstances instead of blaming others for their failures." The insult hung in the air like a slap. Several Vethrian guards had gathered to watch the confrontation, their expressions showing exactly what they thought of someone speaking to their princess's intended husband in such terms. Krell's face darkened to an almost purple shade. "You insignificant little creature. Do you have any idea who you're speaking to? A prince whose own guards just allowed a security breach in the palace where his fiancée lives," Martinez replied without flinching. "Yes, I know exactly who I'm speaking to." Marcus saw Emperor Vorthak arriving with Commander Thane and several high-ranking palace officials. The Emperor's expression was thunderous as he took in the scene, his daughter's intended husband screaming at one of her guards while palace security dealt with an active crisis. "What is the meaning of this?" Emperor Vorthak demanded. Your Majesty, Krell said, clearly trying to regain his composure, this human has been insubordinate and disrespectful. I demand she be punished immediately. Squad leader Martinez is one of our most valued security personnel, the Emperor replied coldly. Perhaps you could explain why you're arguing with my daughter's guards instead of coordinating with palace security to resolve tonight's crisis? It was exactly the wrong thing for Krell to hear. Already on edge from the evening's events, already feeling like his authority and competence were being questioned, the prince completely lost his temper. Because your security is worthless, he exploded. Your guards are incompetent, your systems are vulnerable, and your daughter needs proper protection from real warriors. The words echoed through the corridor, witnessed by dozens of palace personnel. Marcus saw Emperor Vorthax's expression shift from diplomatic concern to cold anger as he processed what Krell had just said about his daughter, his palace, and his people. Proper protection, the Emperor repeated quietly. Yes. Krell was too far gone to recognize the danger in the Emperor's tone. Kreck's methods. Kreck's discipline. Your daughter has been allowed too much freedom, surrounded by weaklings who encourage her rebellious tendencies. Once we are married, I will ensure she learns proper obedience. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus watched Zara's face go pale, then, flush with humiliation and rage. This was the future Krell envisioned for her, not partnership, but domination. Not love, but proper obedience. Emperor Vorthax's voice, when he finally spoke, could have frozen a star. Prince Krell, I believe you misunderstand the nature of this alliance. My daughter is not a possession to be trained. She is the heir to the Vethrian Empire and deserves respect, not discipline. Respect must be earned, Krell shot back, his diplomatic mask completely shattered. And weakness breeds contempt. Your daughter needs a strong hand to guide her, not the coddling she's received from. He never finished the sentence. Marcus moved without conscious thought, his protective instincts finally overriding years of trained invisibility. One moment he was standing quietly beside Zara, the next he was between her and Krell, his normally soft voice carrying the unmistakable tone of someone who had reached his limit. That's enough. Krell looked down at the human guard who barely reached his shoulder, his expression shifting from rage to incredulous amusement. You dare, I dare, Marcus interrupted, meeting the prince's gaze steadily. You want to insult the Emperor, insult the palace, insult our security methods? Fine. But you don't get to stand in front of Princess Zara and describe how you plan to break her spirit like she's a wild animal to be tamed. Marcus, Zara whispered behind him, but he didn't back down. You think humans are weak? Marcus continued, his quiet intensity somehow more intimidating than Krell's bluster. You think we don't know what real protection looks like? Let me show you something. What happened next would be talked about in the palace for years to come. Marcus didn't attack Krell, that would have been too obvious and could have started a diplomatic incident. Instead, he demonstrated exactly why human guards had earned their reputation for unconventional thinking. In 3 swift movements, Marcus disarmed Krell's personal guard, disabled the prince's communication device, and positioned himself in a way that blocked all of Krell's escape routes while simultaneously shielding Princess Zara from any possible counterattack. It took less than 5 seconds. The Krex guards, caught completely off guard by the speed and precision of Marcus's actions, found themselves facing not just one human, but the entire princess's security detail, who had smoothly moved into supporting positions around their teammate. Now, Marcus said calmly, still staring directly at Krell, would you like to reconsider your assessment of our competence? The standoff lasted for several heartbeats, with everyone in the corridor frozen in tableau. Then, Emperor Vorthax's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Prince Krell, I believe this engagement is terminated. The words fell into the silence with the finality of a death sentence. Marcus felt Zara's hand touch his shoulder, and he finally stepped back, his duty done. Krell's face went through several color changes before settling on a sickly green. Your Majesty, surely you're not going to let this insult to my person, the only insult here, the Emperor said coldly, is the one you directed at my daughter and my people. Guards, escort Prince Krell and his delegation to their ships. The Krex Federation is no longer welcome in this palace. As the Krex delegation was led away under heavy guard, Marcus suddenly realized that everyone was staring at him. The shy teacher who had spent months trying to remain invisible had just publicly challenged a galactic prince and won. "Marcus," Zara said softly, her voice full of wonder and something that might have been pride. He turned to face her, expecting to see shock or disapproval at his unprecedented breach of protocol. Instead, he saw tears of relief in her luminescent eyes and a smile that made his heart skip several beats. "Thank you," she whispered. Behind them, Emperor Vorthak cleared his throat. "Private Cole, I believe we need to discuss your future with the Palace Guard. It seems I may have underestimated the capabilities of human protection methods." Marcus nodded, still somewhat dazed by the rapid turn of events. In the space of one evening, he'd gone from invisible guard to the man who had saved Princess Zara from a marriage that would have destroyed everything beautiful about her spirit. But, as he looked into her grateful eyes, Marcus realized that the real challenge was just beginning. Stopping the marriage had been the easy part. Now he had to figure out what came next. The aftermath of Prince Krell's departure created a political earthquake that rippled throughout the Vethrian Empire and beyond. Within hours, news of the broken engagement spread to every major power in the galaxy, sending diplomatic communications flying between homeworlds as various factions tried to understand what it meant for the balance of power. Marcus found himself in the unprecedented position of being both a hero and a political problem. Emperor Vorthak had publicly praised his actions in protecting Princess Zara, but, privately, the Emperor was grappling with the massive diplomatic complications that came with insulting the Krex Federation. "The Krex are threatening to withdraw from all trade agreements," Commander Thane reported during a closed-door meeting 3 days after the incident. "They're also suggesting that other powers can't trust Vethria to honor its commitments." Emperor Vorthak, looking older than his years, stared at the holographic displays showing fleet movements near the Empire's borders. "And what about our allies? How are they responding?" "Mixed reactions, Your Majesty. Some are privately congratulating you for standing up to Krex arrogance, but others are worried about the precedent. If royal marriages can be cancelled over personal disputes." Marcus, standing at attention in the corner of the room, felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. His actions had saved Zara from an unwanted marriage, but they had also destabilized the political foundations that kept peace in their sector of the galaxy. "Private Cole," the Emperor said suddenly, causing Marcus to straighten. "Step forward." Marcus approached the Emperor's desk, acutely aware that his next words might determine not just his own fate, but the future of billions of people across multiple star systems. "Your Majesty, tell me honestly, was last night planned? Did you and your team deliberately create those security incidents to force a confrontation with Prince Krell?" The question hung in the air like a sword. Marcus knew that admitting to the plan would likely result in court-martial and execution, not just for him but for his entire team. But lying to the Emperor would be a betrayal of everything Zara had taught him about honor and integrity. "Yes, Your Majesty," he said quietly. "We created the circumstances that led to Prince Krell revealing his true character. But we didn't force him to say what he said or behave the way he behaved. That was entirely his choice." Emperor Vorthak studied Marcus for a long moment. "And you took this action without consulting me or any other authority?" "Yes, Your Majesty. I accept full responsibility for my team's actions." "Even though you knew it could destroy the alliance my empire needed for security?" Marcus met the Emperor's gaze steadily. "Your Majesty, with respect, some things are more important than political alliances. Your daughter's happiness and freedom are two of those things." The Emperor's expression was unreadable. "You're willing to risk a war to save one person from an unwanted marriage?" "I'm willing to risk a war to save a good person from being destroyed by someone who sees her as property," Marcus replied. "And I believe that any alliance built on treating Princess Zara as a commodity isn't worth having." Commander Thane inhaled sharply at Marcus's bluntness, but Emperor Vorthak simply nodded slowly. "You realize, Private Cole, that your actions have put me in an impossible position. I need to maintain the Empire's security, but I also can't ignore what I witnessed in that corridor. Prince Krell showed his true nature, and it was disturbing. What are you going to do? Marcus asked. That depends on several factors, the Emperor said. First, can your team provide me with detailed intelligence on exactly how you identified and exploited our security vulnerabilities? If humans can do it, others can too, and we need to address those weaknesses immediately. Of course, Your Majesty. Second, I need to understand what alternative solutions you might suggest for our security needs. You've destroyed one alliance, what do you propose we do instead? Marcus felt a moment of panic. He was a teacher and a guard, not a military strategist or diplomat. But then, he remembered his sister's words about seeing what others missed, and, suddenly, an idea began forming. Your Majesty, what if the solution isn't about finding another alliance to replace the Krex Federation? What if it's about changing the game entirely? Explain. The Krex offered you military support in exchange for a political marriage. But humans have proven that we can provide effective security with unconventional methods. And there are dozens of smaller species in the galaxy who have valuable capabilities but no political power because they're not part of the major alliances. Emperor Vorthak's eyes sharpened with interest. You're suggesting a coalition of minor powers instead of dependence on major ones? I'm suggesting that Vethria could become the center of a new kind of alliance. One based on mutual respect and cooperation instead of domination and marriage contracts. Humans bring tactical innovation, the Zalani have advanced medical knowledge, the Korthari are master engineers, the Inari have unmatched information networks. All species that the major powers treat as barely worth notice, Commander Thane said thoughtfully. Exactly. But, together, they represent capabilities that could rival any of the traditional power blocks. And none of them would demand that Princess Zara sacrifice her personal freedom for political convenience. The Emperor stood and walked to the window overlooking his capital city. It's an interesting idea, Private Cole. But it would require someone to coordinate these diverse species, someone with the diplomatic skills to build trust between groups that have never worked together before. Marcus saw where this was leading and felt his heart skip. Someone like Princess Zara. Someone exactly like Princess Zara, the Emperor confirmed. She has the intelligence, the compassion, and the political training to make such an alliance work. And, after last night, she also has something else valuable, a reputation for putting principles above convenience. What are you saying, Your Majesty? Emperor Vorthak turned back to face Marcus. I'm saying that perhaps my daughter's unmarried status isn't the political liability I thought it was. Perhaps it's actually an asset that gives her the freedom to build something entirely new. The implications hit Marcus like a bolt of lightning. Not only was Zara free from the arranged marriage, but the Emperor was considering giving her a role that would let her make the kind of difference she'd always dreamed about. There's one more thing, the Emperor continued. This new alliance would need security coordination between multiple species with different combat traditions and technologies. It would require guards who understand unconventional thinking and can adapt to diverse challenges. Human guards, Marcus said quietly. Led by someone who has proven capable of thinking beyond traditional limitations. Someone who puts protecting what matters above following standard protocols. Marcus felt the room spinning slightly. Was the Emperor actually suggesting what he thought he was suggesting? Your Majesty, I'm honored, but I'm just a teacher from Earth. I don't have the qualifications to Private Cole, you have the only qualification that matters. My daughter trusts you. And, after watching you in action, I understand why. Before Marcus could respond, there was a soft knock at the door. Commander Thane opened it to reveal Princess Zara, still wearing the formal robe she'd donned for the morning's cancelled diplomatic meetings. Father, I heard that Prince Krell has left orbit. Is it true that the engagement is permanently terminated? Yes, Zara. The Krex alliance is finished. Marcus watched as relief flooded across Zara's features, followed quickly by concern. But, what about the Empire's security? The trade agreements? That are being handled, Emperor Vorthak said calmly. In fact, I have a proposition for you. How would you like to become our first ambassador of coalition development? Zara blinked in surprise.
I don't understand. I'm offering you the chance to build something new, daughter.
A coalition of smaller powers based on mutual respect and cooperation. It would mean traveling to multiple worlds, negotiating with diverse species, and creating entirely new forms of diplomatic partnership.
You're serious? Completely.
And you'd have your own security detail, led by someone who has already proven capable of protecting what matters most. Zara's gaze moved to Marcus, and he saw understanding dawn in her luminescent eyes.
Marcus would be my security chief? If he accepts the position.
It would mean leaving Earth permanently, taking responsibility for your safety across multiple hostile environments, and probably dealing with political situations that no military manual has ever covered.
Marcus felt his throat go dry.
The Emperor was offering him everything he'd never dared to dream about: a chance to stay close to Zara, a role that would let him use his skills to protect people on a galactic scale, and the opportunity to help build something that could change the balance of power throughout the known universe.
I accept, he said without hesitation. Zara's smile could have powered a small sun. Then, I accept too. Excellent, Emperor Vorthak said. You'll have 6 months to prepare. Use the time wisely. Once you begin this mission, there will be no going back.
As they left the Emperor's office, Marcus found himself walking beside Princess Zara through the palace corridors where just days ago she had been trapped by an unwanted future.
Now those same corridors seemed full of infinite possibility.
Marcus, she said softly as they reached the gardens where they'd had so many quiet conversations, can I ask you something?
Anything. Are you doing this because you believe in the mission, or because of me?
It was a fair question, and Marcus considered it carefully before answering.
Both, he said finally. I believe in what we could build together. And I.
He struggled for words that could express the depth of what he felt without overstepping boundaries that might still exist between a princess and her guard.
You what? Zara prompted gently.
I love you, Marcus said simply. I love your compassion, your intelligence, your dreams of making the galaxy a better place. I love the way you see the best in people, even when they can't see it in themselves. And I love the person I become when I'm trying to be worthy of your trust. Zara stopped walking and turned to face him fully.
Marcus, do you understand what my father just offered us?
A chance to work together building something important. A chance to travel the galaxy together, facing unknown dangers and solving impossible problems, with only each other to depend on. Marcus felt his heart racing as he began to understand what she was saying.
Zara, are you?
I'm saying that somewhere between our first conversation in these gardens and last night when you stood between me and Prince Krell, I fell in love with a shy human teacher who turned out to be the bravest man I've ever met.
I'm not brave, Marcus protested. I spent months trying to be invisible. You were invisible until something threatened me. Then, you became exactly what I needed you to be. Do you have any idea how extraordinary that is?
Before Marcus could answer, Zara stepped closer and kissed him softly. It was nothing like the formal, political kisses she'd been expected to exchange with Prince Krell. This was real and warm and full of promises about futures they would choose together. When they broke apart, Marcus realized that for the first time since his sister's death, he felt truly at home.
So, Zara said with a smile that contained both mischief and love, ready to change the galaxy, Marcus Cole? With you? I'm ready for anything.
As they stood together in the garden where their love story had begun, both of them understood that they were about to embark on an adventure that would test everything they'd learned about courage, trust, and the power of people who refused to accept that things couldn't change. The galaxy was about to discover that humans and Vethrians made an excellent team. But, more importantly, Marcus and Zara were about to prove that sometimes the best alliances weren't built on political convenience, but on two people who chose to face the unknown together.
The real adventure was just beginning.
2 years later, Marcus stood on the observation deck of the diplomatic vessel Unity's Promise, watching as 3 different fleets converged on the neutral zone for the first formal assembly of the Coalition of Free Worlds. What had begun as a desperate alternative to the failed Krex alliance had grown into something that was reshaping the political landscape of the entire galaxy. The Korthari Engineering Corps just confirmed their arrival, came a familiar voice behind him. Marcus turned to see Zara approaching, her diplomatic robes replaced by the practical traveling clothes she preferred during their missions. She looked tired but happy, the strain of the past months balanced by the satisfaction of seeing their impossible dream becoming reality.
How many species are we expecting for the final count?
Marcus asked, slipping naturally into his role as her security chief while simultaneously being her partner in every sense of the word. 43 confirmed delegations, with 12 more requesting observer status, Zara replied, moving to stand beside him at the viewport.
The Inari Information Network has been invaluable in reaching the smaller worlds that never had voices in galactic politics before.
Marcus nodded, his mind automatically cataloging the security challenges of protecting delegates from 43 different species, each with their own biological needs, cultural taboos, and potential enemies. It was exactly the kind of impossible logistical nightmare that human adaptability was perfectly suited to handle.
Any word from the major powers?
The Krex Federation is officially denouncing the assembly as a gathering of insignificant rebels, Zara said with a slight smile. The Proximan merchant houses are taking a wait-and-see approach, and the Ulterian Empire has sent what they call a cultural observer, but what we know is actually an intelligence operative.
Worried about us becoming a real threat to their hegemony?
Terrified, Zara confirmed.
A coalition of 43 worlds working together represents more combined resources than any single empire can claim. If we can actually make this work. She didn't need to finish the sentence. They both knew what successful cooperation between the galaxy's smaller powers could mean. No longer would species have to choose between submission to larger empires or complete isolation. No longer would political marriages and territorial concessions be the only paths to security and prosperity.
Speaking of making it work, Marcus said, Chen's analysis of the security protocols shows 3 potential flashpoints we need to monitor. Over the past 2 years, the human security team had expanded to include specialists from a dozen different species, but Chen, Johnson, Williams, and Martinez remained the core group. They developed security methods that combined human adaptability with the unique capabilities of their coalition partners, creating protection systems that even the major powers were beginning to study and copy.
The Zalani-Korthan territorial dispute? Zara guessed. That's the big one.
Both species are sending delegates, but they've been fighting over mining rights in the Outer Rim for the past 6 months. There's also the religious differences between the Inari and the Blessed of Proxima, and the trade conflict between New Terra and the Korthari shipyards.
Any of them serious enough to derail the assembly? Marcus considered the question. Not if we handle them right. The beautiful thing about this coalition is that everyone here chose to be here.
Unlike the traditional empire alliances, nobody's being forced to cooperate.
That gives us leverage to encourage compromise. Zara smiled at his confidence.
Over the past 2 years, the shy teacher had transformed into one of the galaxy's most respected security coordinators, but he'd never lost his fundamental belief that problems could be solved through understanding and creative thinking. How's the personal security situation? She asked, unconsciously echoing the question she asked before every major diplomatic event.
Tight but not oppressive, Marcus replied.
Each delegation brought their own guards, but they've all agreed to coordinate through our central command. The Korthari have provided some fascinating defensive technology, and the Inari intelligence network means we know about threats before they fully form.
And us? Any specific concerns about threats to the coalition's leadership? Marcus's expression grew more serious.
3 intelligence services are monitoring our activities, and there have been some inquiries about our personal relationship that suggest someone is looking for leverage to use against us. But nothing that rises to the level of immediate danger. Their relationship had indeed become a subject of galactic interest. The love story of a human guard and an alien princess had captured imaginations across dozens of worlds, but it had also made them symbols of the coalition's ideals. Some saw them as proof that cooperation between different species was not only possible but beautiful. Others viewed them as dangerous examples of traditional boundaries breaking down.
Any regrets? Zara asked suddenly. About what? About choosing this life.
About leaving Earth permanently, about taking responsibility for a political movement that could collapse at any moment, about falling in love with someone whose life will always be complicated by politics and danger. Marcus turned to look at her directly. Even after 2 years, he was still amazed by her beauty, but it was the intelligence and compassion in her eyes that took his breath away. "Never," he said simply. "This is exactly where I'm supposed to be." Their conversation was interrupted by a communication from the bridge. Ambassador Zara, we're receiving priority signals from the assembly site. All delegations have arrived safely, and the opening ceremony is scheduled to begin in 3 hours. Acknowledged, Zara replied. Marcus, are you ready to make history? As they made their way to the shuttle bay, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The coalition hadn't been easy to build. It had required hundreds of individual negotiations, careful balancing of competing interests, and constant adaptation to new challenges that nobody had anticipated. But it had also proven something that the galaxy's major powers hadn't wanted to admit: given the chance to choose their own destinies, most species preferred cooperation to conquest, trade to tribute, and friendship to forced alliances. The assembly site was a marvel of interspecies engineering. Built in the neutral space between several star systems, it combined Korthari structural innovations, Inari information systems, human adaptive design principles, and aesthetic contributions from a dozen other cultures. The result was a space that felt welcoming to creatures as diverse as the gas-breathing Medhani and the crystal-based lifeforms of the resonance worlds. Impressive, Marcus murmured as their shuttle approached the docking bay. It should be, Zara replied with pride. Every species contributed something to its construction. It's a physical representation of what we can accomplish when we work together instead of against each other. As they disembarked, Marcus automatically shifted into full security mode, his eyes scanning the massive chamber where delegates from 43 worlds were gathering. His expanded team was already in position, but he knew that the real test of their security arrangements would come during the next 3 days of intense negotiations. The opening ceremony was deliberately simple but profound. Instead of the elaborate rituals that typically marked diplomatic gatherings, each delegate simply stood and stated their species' commitment to the principles of mutual respect, voluntary cooperation, and peaceful conflict resolution. When it came time for Zara to speak as the coalition's founding coordinator, Marcus felt a surge of pride that had nothing to do with their personal relationship. This was the woman who had dreamed of making a real difference in the galaxy, and she had turned that dream into a reality that was reshaping interstellar politics. 2 years ago, Zara said, her voice carrying clearly throughout the chamber, many of us felt powerless in a galaxy dominated by empires that saw us as either subjects or resources. Today, we gather as equals, united not by fear or need, but by choice and shared values. She paused, her gaze moving across the incredibly diverse gathering. The coalition of free worlds exists to prove that cooperation is stronger than conquest, that diversity is more valuable than conformity, and that the future belongs to those who choose to build it together. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Delegates from dozens of species rose in applause, their various forms of appreciation creating a symphony of support that echoed through the chamber. But Marcus, watching from his security position, noticed something else: the subtle movements of figures in the observer galleries, the carefully neutral expressions of the intelligence operatives from the major powers, and the tension that spoke of forces gathering to respond to this challenge to the established order. The coalition was no longer a desperate experiment. It had become a legitimate threat to the way things had always been done in the galaxy. And that meant the real challenges were just beginning. Over the next 2 days, Marcus watched as the assembly tackled issues that would have seemed impossible to resolve just a few years earlier. Trade disputes were settled through creative compromise. Territorial conflicts were resolved through innovative sharing agreements. Resource allocation was handled through cooperative development rather than competitive exploitation. It wasn't perfect. There were heated arguments, walkouts, and moments when it seemed like fundamental differences couldn't be bridged. But every time a crisis emerged, someone found a way to build a bridge instead of a wall. On the final day, as the assembly prepared to ratify the formal charter of the Coalition of Free Worlds, Marcus received an urgent communication from Chen. "We've got movement on the perimeter," she reported.
3 ships just dropped out of hyperspace. Configuration matches Krex Federation heavy cruisers. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. Hostile intent?
Unknown, but they're not responding to standard communication protocols, and they're moving into weapons range.
Alert all security teams. I'm coming to you.
Marcus found Zara in the final negotiation session, working with delegates to resolve the last few details of the charter language. He caught her eye and gave a subtle signal that meant urgent but not immediate danger. She nodded almost imperceptibly and continued her diplomatic work while Marcus coordinated the security response to the approaching Krex vessels.
Any chance this is coincidence? Martinez asked as they gathered in the command center.
None, Marcus replied grimly. They're here to disrupt the charter signing, probably by demonstrating that the coalition can't even protect its own assembly.
What's our response capability? Johnson asked. Marcus looked at the tactical display showing their available assets.
12 light escort vessels from various coalition species, plus the station's defensive systems.
Against 3 Krex heavy cruisers, that's not much of a contest in traditional terms.
But we don't fight in traditional terms, Williams observed.
Exactly. Chen, what's the status of the Inari information network? Fully operational.
We can monitor Krex communications and coordinate our response in real time.
And the Korthari engineering teams?
Standing by with some modifications to the station's defensive grid that the Krex probably haven't seen before. Marcus felt the familiar calm that came when a complex problem required creative solutions.
Here's what we're going to do.
The plan that emerged was purely human in its audacity and completely coalition in its execution. Instead of trying to match Krex firepower, they would demonstrate exactly why the coalition of free worlds was more effective than traditional military thinking. As the Krex vessels moved into attack position, they received a communication from the assembly site. But, instead of the desperate pleas or defiant challenges they expected, they heard something that completely confounded their tactical planning.
Krex vessels, this is Ambassador Zara of the Coalition of Free Worlds.
We understand you have concerns about our assembly and the political changes it represents.
We invite you to send a delegation to address those concerns through diplomatic channels. The Krex commander's response was predictably arrogant.
Coalition vessels, you will disperse immediately and abandon this illegal gathering, or we will be forced to take action to restore order to this sector.
We're sorry you feel that way, Zara replied calmly. Perhaps a demonstration of our defensive capabilities will help you reconsider the wisdom of aggressive action. What happened next would be studied in military academies for decades to come.
The Korthari defensive modifications activated, creating an energy shield that didn't just protect the assembly site but actively redirected incoming weapons fire. The Inari information network allowed perfect coordination between the coalition's small escort vessels, turning 12 independent ships into a single, perfectly synchronized defensive unit. And human tactical innovation tied it all together with a strategy that turned the Krex's superior firepower into a liability. Within minutes, the 3 heavy cruisers found themselves surrounded, outmaneuvered, and facing opponents who seemed to anticipate their every move. More importantly, they discovered that every shot they fired was being redirected harmlessly into space while the coalition forces suffered no damage at all.
Krex Commander, Zara's voice came over the communication channel, still perfectly calm. Are you prepared to discuss this diplomatically now? The standoff ended not with violence, but with the most humiliating retreat in Krex military history. 3 heavy cruisers, the pride of one of the galaxy's most feared navies, forced to withdraw by a collection of species they had always dismissed as beneath notice. As the Krex vessels jumped to hyperspace, Marcus found Zara in the assembly chamber, where delegates from 43 worlds were putting their final signatures on the charter of the Coalition of Free Worlds. How does it feel? He asked quietly.
Like the beginning of something wonderful, she replied, then smiled at him with love and pride.
How does it feel to you?
Marcus looked around the chamber, watching a species that had never worked together before celebrated their shared achievement. He thought about his sister, who had taught him that some things were worth protecting, and about the shy teacher he'd been before learning that sometimes being brave meant stepping out of the shadows.
It feels like home, he said simply.
As they stood together watching history being made, Marcus realized that he'd learned something important about the nature of love and courage. Neither was about grand gestures or dramatic moments. Both were about choosing, every day, to protect and nurture what mattered most. The coalition of free worlds would face many challenges in the years to come. There would be political crises, military threats, and moments when it seemed like the dream of peaceful cooperation was impossible to maintain. But, as long as there were people like Zara willing to build bridges instead of walls, and people like Marcus willing to protect what they had built, the galaxy would always have hope for something better than conquest and domination. The shy human guard and the alien princess had indeed changed everything. And their love story had become the foundation for a new kind of future, where diversity was strength, cooperation was power, and anyone could choose to be exactly who they were meant to be. In the end, that might be the most human quality of all, the refusal to accept that things couldn't change, and the determination to make them better, one impossible dream at a time.